Mic wasn't plugged in there. So thank you, everybody, for being patient. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious today. On today's episode, we're going to talk about a flying carpet briefly that was proposed to bring astronauts back from orbit, their own personal orbital escape system. And we're going to highlight the Apollo 7 flight 54 years ago on this date in space history in 1968. Three Apollo astronauts took our Apollo 7 spacecraft that had been completely redone after the Apollo 1 fire and had a wonderful 10-day mission. And of course, that was Wally Schirra, Don Isley, and Walt Cunningham. And Walt Cunningham is the only astronaut of that trio still alive at age 90. And then, yes, I've been on vacation and so grateful to be back here on the Space Coast, but I had a wonderful time visiting family and friends in Ohio. And then, of course, I lived 35 years in Tennessee. And I'm going to show you a couple museums, a little bit of tourism going on there. As I did stop at the Neil Armstrong Museum in Wapakoneta, and just about 90 miles from my hometown of Findlay, which is south of Toledo, and enjoyed that and made some contacts there. We're going to show you some pictures of the Armstrong Museum. And then we're going to celebrate the Apollo 7 mission, where it is at. Who knows where the Apollo 7 command module is? Marty, greetings, my friend. I missed you the past week, and I appreciate you carrying on there. Do you know where the Apollo 7 command module is?
I think you told me a few minutes ago.
Oh, well, but before that, we don't want to let the cat out of the bag. So Dave
know.
Stangy can look it up on his iPhone there. But it's in a very interesting place. Okay, it's in Texas. I'll give you that hint. So, but I do want to thank Nick Thomas and Mikey Haddad for doing their programs this week as a guest hosting our program here. And then, of course, we had some recorded shows, so I basically mailed it in last week. And I know a couple of the shows weren't up to par that I like it, but hope you enjoyed them anyway. And Marty, we're into our 650th episode of this. Or is it 700? I lost track. We're in the 700. Yeah, we're on the 730s or something of Stay Curious. And we're grateful that you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify and Twitch if you've got those channels out there. But let's kick it off a little bit today with the Magic Carpet Ride. Before I get involved in that, I just want to remind y'all, Mr. Hugh Harris will be here tomorrow with the Shuttles of Rocktober will kick off, all right? And so, Hugh, we're going to have you, looking forward to having him on Stay Curious, the voice of NASA, tomorrow. Well, a Magic Carpet Ride, if you will, has always been thought about, and though the magic carpets of the old Arabian Nights days, they didn't think about going into orbit. But would you believe that the Douglas Company had a flying carpet escape system proposed by Douglas Aircraft Corporation in October 1963? The escape system would be saucer shaped with a blunt end nose, cone shaped vehicle. 21 feet across, act as its own braking and re-entry vehicle. Well, what does that look like? Well, there is the astronaut as he ejects from this paracone, is what it was called. And then the paracone would go out like this, and I'll tell you some details about it here. And then you're going to re-enter the atmosphere in this paracone escape concept, all right? So what was going to happen was the astronaut would get in the chair, roughly, they would orient themselves facing along the directional motion so that they would ignite the solid rocket motor towards the direction of motion. The motor had 18 seconds of low-level vernier thrust, during which time the pilot would correct its alignment using handhold controlled motors. That's what they're trying to show here. It then went into 60 seconds of full thrust. The paracone was designed to handle re-entry angles up to 30 degrees misaligned, and the accuracy of this system was said to be 800 kilometers. All right, Marty, that's about 480 miles is the accuracy of that. After the retro rocket motor emptied and was discarded, a gas pressure was deployed from another canister. With a low ballistic coefficient, the paracone would be made of Rene 41 alloy fabric with Teflon coating, and it would unfoil to this. So you've got the astronaut inside now of this low ballistic coefficient paracone. No parachute required, Marty. A ballistic re-entry followed with a peak of 9 Gs. Could you imagine pulling 9 Gs in this drawing here? The terminal velocity was about 25 miles an hour, and impact was absorbed by the crushable structure of the cap of the cone, assuming that you would land on the cap of the cone there. And so here's another schematic structural configuration. There's the seat on the left with the astronaut in it, and then you see the blunt. It's 21 feet across and kind of deep. It looks there, but some of the ideas of the 1960s that were cooked up when we thought that we were going to have people in space just left and right, hundreds at a time. And by the way, Marty, we eclipsed, I think, 14 people. Our record is in space now, 11 on the space station, and 3 Chinese tachionauts orbiting on their space station. And we'll try to get into that a little bit more later this week as I get into my wheelhouse of our shuttle missions of October and what's going on in the current events of space. So there's your magic carpet ride there, Marty, to go to space. Wow, that would be something. I don't know. That is one brave astronaut, the first one that would ever test that out and think that they were going to survive a re-entry in that thing and then land without a parachute. Yeah, right. So, Marty, you're writing down a question there, a comment from one of our Stay Curious watchers.
Yeah, Dave Stange says the location of that museum is at Frontiers of Flight Museum in Dallas, Texas.
And Dave Stange wins the quickie. Who can look that up quickest? But you may have known that, Dave. That's absolutely right. And we're going to go to the History of Flight Museum. It's really a cool museum. It is at Love Airfield in Dallas, all right, not too far from downtown Dallas. And Love Airfield, of course, is where President Kennedy's plane landed out there during that fateful November day in 1963. Well, let's kick it off with the Apollo 7, guys. Launched today, of course, 18 months after the tragic fire that I've been on the Space Coast 5 years, and Marty, you know it, when people that lived this Apollo 1 fire start talking about it, their whole demeanor changes. It is a scar on everybody that lived through that Apollo 1 fire. And but a lot of those ashes, the Phoenix, it was erected, and that was Apollo 7, built the way it should have been in the first place. And one thing that Marty will like that I'm going to point out here is that they insulated all of the electrical to make it waterproof, and that probably saved the lives of the Apollo 13 astronauts when they got in the command module, and it was dripping with moisture and water everywhere. So, and Mr. Fred Hayes says that, doesn't he, Marty? That what was done to resurrect the Apollo Block 1 module into the Block 2 probably saved their lives, because they were now thinking outside the box and like, well, we've got to make sure everything is waterproofed, and they did. Well, October 11th, 1968 was a hot day on Cape Canaveral, and a pleasant breeze tempered the Florida heat as Apollo 7 lifted off at 11:02 a.m. from Launch Pad 36, where Their friends had died a year and a half earlier. The Saturn 1B, this was a Saturn 1B rocket. Okay, you'll see it in a moment, not the Saturn 5. And here's the pre-breakfast, traditional breakfast meal. They probably had it about 9 o'clock in the morning. Wally Schirra is, Wally's there with the black hair. That is actually Deke Slayton right here next to me. That's Deke Slayton. Wally's sitting behind him. I'm not sure who's standing up there, Marty. That could be the press secretary at the time. Don Isley's beside Wally, and across from him is Walt Cunningham. And Walt back there has got the most perfect flat top I've ever seen on any astronaut. His hair flat top is just perfect. But Marty, you know who's sitting there in the suit beside Walt, enjoying steak and eggs, it looks like.
Looks like Werner von Braun.
Nope. Nope. That's Mr. James Webb. That's Mr. James Webb, the famous telescope named after this great NASA administrator all through the 60s and the Apollo era. He was after Mr. Glennon, was the first NASA administrator. And you know what is ironic about the great Mr. Webb is that he resigned in 1968 and was not the head of NASA when we landed on the moon. And of course, you know why, don't you, Marty? Politics. He was a Democrat, and the Nixon administration had won, so he knew that he was a political appointment, and so sadly he wasn't the administrator when we landed on the moon, and had a lot to do with it, lobbying for the money in there. So I think that's cool that he's sitting there with the astronauts, and there you see a cameraman at the end of the table, are always taking pictures and movies, and that would always bug me because we've talked to a lot of NASA workers that like yourself, Marty, and Mikey Haddad of payloads, that there's always someone with a camera shoving it in your face to document stuff. So I guess you get immune to that. And look what I have here, is we can make the picture bigger there. Is I've got Apollo 7. Some of you might not even know what these are. These are matches. That's a matchbooks. That's a matchbooks. Yeah, go ahead and zoom in. Show them that Wally Schirra has signed that matchbook. How cool is that? Okay. And then their names are over on the back here on this. Not too much swag given out these days in the way of matches or lighters or anything like that. But boy, it used to be a big thing back in the day, right, Marty? And that's what we have behind us there at the Frontier of Flight Museum in Love Field, Dallas, Texas, is where the command module rests today, back there. And we'll talk about that here in a minute there. So there's the guys getting breakfast with their boss, Deke Slayton, steak and eggs, and then there's the launch of the Saturn S1B, that they've got a beautiful full flight scale over there at Space View, the Rocket Garden.
That was a pretty thick steak.
Does that look like a thick steak? Yeah, off my shoulder here, that is a thick steak. What do you think? Is that steak?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is steak. I thought it was.
Yeah, they had steak and eggs for breakfast.
Yeah, they get a big chunk of steak there for sure. Their last meal on Earth for a while, or forever. You never know that, right? So, but there's the big launch of the Saturn 1B rocket from Pad 34. There's not much of that pad left, and they still go out there. The Apollo 1 committee goes out there on January 27th every year to do that. What's that at the top? Oh,
it's the White Room.
Oh, the White Room is way to the right up there. Right, way up there at the top is the White Room. You got to circle that. Yeah, there's the White Room up there flung away. So this was the only human launch off Pad 34. And then they moved them all to 39A, which was just called 39 at the time. Found a couple of cool pictures of the boys there. There's Cunningham on the left, Isley in the center, and of course, Wally Schirra, who, if you didn't see Nick Thomas's story about Stay Curious last Monday when he guest hosted. He talked a lot about Wally on Wally's the 60th anniversary of Wally's Mercury flight. So his Mercury flight and then his Apollo flight were in the month of October in there. Now, Isley, of course, is spelled E-I-S-L-E. Don Isley. His name has two N's, D-O-N-N, E-I-S-E-L-E. If you wondered how to pronounce that, Hazel Banks, one of our great volunteers here who was secretary to the astronauts. Hi, Hazel. She said it's pronounced Isley, like the Isley Brothers, the great singing duo. So since she worked for Don, I'll believe that that's how he wanted it said back then. Once the vehicle cleared the launch pad, a three-shift mission control team took over, led by Glenn Lunny, Gene Kranz, and Jerry Griffin. They were in Houston. This put America back in the moon race with the Soviet Union, 18 months after the death of the three Apollo 1 astronauts. And Commander Shara said during the ascent to orbit she was riding like a dream. And then 10 minutes later, they were in a 150-mile approximate orbit above the Earth. And this was Shara's last flight. He announced that he was going to retire. And he's the only person to fly a Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo spacecraft. And there's another odd picture that I found of the trio. That's a model of the rocket. At first, you look at that, Marty, and you think, oh, the rocket's way in the background. No, that's a model that they've got on a stand there. And there's Wally with the camera in his hand, and Don's got a camera. And they got those cool-looking ascots there. That was kind of their thing. Cunningham likes wearing that ascot, too. A little bit of rocket fuel there. I missed my rocket fuel here, Marty. The 11-day mission was textbook with very few problems. Much publicized was the head colds that the astronauts encountered. They all shared a cold. Wally came back and did an ActiFed cold commercial for some money after this flight. And a lot of maybe too much is made of what people want to say was an insubordination, where they told the mission control that they'd had enough to do, and they were turning off their mics and taking a break. And some of that is true. You can look at the actual text of these things, but at no point, not text, I want to say, Marty, the transcripts of these are all on PDF files out there in the cloud somewhere. But they were a little bit irascible. None of them ever flew again. Wally was going to retire. Don and Cunningham both never flew again. So you think that they could have been on the hot seat for at least a command a moon landing. And so whatever antics went on behind the scenes didn't endear them to Deke Slayton very much, who was the main person you had to please to get a flight on there. But it was a textbook 11-day mission. It had to be that way because our pride in going to the moon was on the line for sure. And I'm looking at, did I put those on there? Oh, yeah, those are down here a little later. Yeah, they did live television from space for the very first time, and they joked, keep those cards and letters coming, folks. They had little cue cards that they would show up, and really made the small command module look very big from those movies inside. But I was glued to a TV set, age 14, watching it all going on for sure. But the main thing was to demonstrate that the command service module could last for almost over 7 days in space, because it's going to take 3 days to go to the moon, 3 days back, and at least a day there. They demonstrated live TV broadcast capability from space, and they demonstrated the rendezvous capability by rendezvousing with phantom targets in orbit on there. But Wally Schirra couldn't believe how well it drove, so to speak, to go to places in there. So years ago, I went to the Frontiers of Flight Museum. That's the proper name, the Frontiers of Flight. This is the 50th anniversary of this mission. So I guess I was there in 2018. And this is a beautiful, beautiful museum. You need to have it on your bucket list. It is an homage to the Pan Am and other airlines that flew out of Love Field, including there's a big deal there about the Concorde that was Braniff Airlines that flew out of there. Not sure if it flew out of Love Field or Dallas Field, but it was one of them. So here is the beautiful, beautiful command module of Apollo 7. They didn't name it, I don't think, Marty, because they didn't need to name it because there was no lunar module up there. So it's just Apollo 7 on the call out. But one thing that's very unusual about this space vehicle, of all the space vehicles I've seen, and maybe you, is the docents actually encouraged you to touch it. All right. And there's as I was up above shooting a picture down, a guy did go up and touch it on the back side of it there. They don't mind that you could touch this thing and hang off the hatch. You'll see the hatch here in a minute. There's the hatch. You walk right up on a ramp and look right inside. Now they got a plastic plexiglass over the hatch in there, so you can't get your head inside the vehicle. But there, I was holding the door and playing with the knobs and everything like that with the docent standing. I go, "Is this okay? Did I touch that?" Everybody touches it. Go ahead. So I thought that was pretty cool. A good trivia question: what is the one Apollo command module that you're allowed to touch and even encouraged to do so? And that'd be Apollo 7 at the Frontiers of Aviation. Show you, there I am touching it. I had to show you. Now, I'm not sure all those little putty holes and stuff like that on it, Marty. It doesn't look like that's really part of it. But yes, you can touch this thing all over. And one of the little displays there that I enjoyed about Apollo 7 was on the 11-day mission. They had, every day, they had lined up there what was the highlight of the day and picked a picture out of that day. There's day, what day is that, 7? Where Wally's got the cold, the famous picture of him with the cold there. The one that's where my head's at's got what Cunningham ate that day. So it's kind of cool to see a little bit of a vignette of what was a day in the life of these guys in space up there. So you could see the wonderful science that was being done, as well as all the engineering tests on this new spacecraft. There's an overview of the aviation of Frontiers of Flight. There's so many cool things way in the back, way in the back, Marty's the command module. In the last row there's an orange flying wing. Yeah, there's the command module right back there. They had a very cool display about Admiral Byrd going to Antarctica with his planes, and the outfit that he wore there of whatever skin it is. And then there's also a fabulous display of the Hindenburg. They probably got, I don't know if it's the most items, but the most I've ever seen of any Hindenburg stuff. They got the chair in the room that the radio communicator in the Hindenburg was sitting in. He apparently survived it. That was the dirigible that blew up. So very, very, very cool museum, the Frontiers of Flight. Hope that you get a chance to go there. And yes, they had a moon rock. They had a moon rock from Apollo 15 there. About the size of your little finger there, okay? Tip of your little finger. I've seen several of displays like this. There's also one like this in the Tom Stafford's museum in Weatherford, Oklahoma. Yeah, Marty.
Yeah, Ben Houston has a comment. He said they also rendezvoused with the upper stage. No LEM, but they had a docking target inside. I did not know that.
Okay, that was a docking target. The upper stage probably did go to orbit on that Saturn S-1B, so they could use that as a docking target. Thank you, Ben, for that little addition of space history. And we appreciate Ben Houston staying curious along with all of you out there. The next picture I have, I had to throw the stewardesses in there for the Braniff airline. This was really a nice display there, showing you over the years the stewardesses and stewards, the outfits that they would wear for Braniff Airlines, which was the airlines for the Concorde. And as the world went hippie, so did their outfits there, as you see in the two mannequins in the middle, the one with the umbrella and the one there. So a great museum, a lot of aviation, commercial airline history and so forth. And I'm looking off there a little bit. Sorry, one of our monitors not exactly right in front of me. We got to give a call to Trekkie Techie and get her straighten out our studio here a little bit, as our camera angles are messed up a little bit on our television monitors that we use. Well, let's go quickly to the Neil Armstrong Museum in Wapakoneta, Ohio, right on I-75. Is on the other side of this building. You go up and down I-75 and you see this big round moon. They don't have moon craters on it, but that's the image it is. Most of this museum's underground, ironically. As you're going in there, they built it so that it is, most of it is in the ground underneath there. So got to go check out the Neil Armstrong Museum, where they house the Gemini 8 space capsule that, of course, Neil Armstrong and David Scott had a near-fatal event in it when the number 8 thruster stuck and spun them around and around and around. And talked to one of the docents there, a historian that knew a lot about that, Greg Brown. You're going to see his picture here in a minute. But this is the module, the gull wings opened up on one side there. It's completely encased in plastic, so you can't touch it. If you touch it, you're touching the plastic. So yeah, this is another one you could touch, but you're not touching the actual vehicle. And gives you an idea of the size of the thing with people standing around there. And I had fun with this. This is one of Neil's training Apollo suits that I saw a reflection of me in the glass case that this is in, and played around with it a little bit so I could put my head on an Apollo spacesuit. I am on vacation, folks. And they've got a pretty big moon rock there. In fact, this is one of the biggest moon rocks I've ever seen. Don't know how Neil did it, but this museum is technically owned by the Ohio Historical Society. It actually closed down when the state of Ohio had a budget crunch, and they closed their parks and museums, I think in 2017, something like that. Now I was told that there is a group of people that are the board of directors now, and so the state of Ohio doesn't have full control over this museum, but that's why they got this gigantic big moon rock there. And I show a picture here I was trying to take with my hand behind it and getting all the reflections. That's me in the upper left there. You see my hand. Yeah, that would fit right here in the palm of my hand, that moon rock. That is one of the biggest I've ever seen. And it was a moon rock that Neil Armstrong actually did grab. It was a 20-some pound rock, and they chipped a piece of it off of it there. And there's all kinds of data around there to show, whoop, there I am. I'm in a moon suit. And there is Mr. Greg Brown. Thanks. Enjoyed meeting you. What a wealth of information. This true spaceflight historian. And we're going to maybe get him on a Zoom call here on Stay Curious, but you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be calling him up and cross-check some of my facts from now on. And always enjoy making new friends at the museums around our wonderful country. This was an odd thing that I saw, one of the oddest things I've never seen. Can't wait to show our collections manager, Chuck Jeffrey, this. NASA provided heel restraints for the crew, and these are it, in case they were forced to return and splash down without pressure suits. The restraints would safely secure the astronauts' feet and legs to the couches. They stored them in the lower equipment bay of the command module. But it says in case they were forced to return and splash down without pressure suits, Marty. One, I could never, ever imagine that happening. And two, why would they need these restraints? Why wouldn't they need these with the pressure suits? So I'm curious about that. Make any sense to you, Marty?
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, that's this is at the Neil Armstrong Museum, and I've never seen this anywhere in manuals or anything. But there it is. And we wanted to show you a little bit of swag from the Apollo Gallery, the Lunar Module Gallery. Actually, this is they have a desky there, the computer. Marty, why don't you use your magic circle there? And the desky is this is from the command module. The key buttons that were punched in for the computer, 64K memory being loaded and reloaded there. To the right of it is above it, the cone-shaped thing. That's another. That we have a copy of this. We have that. We have the same model in our Apollo gallery. That's a command module with the astronauts in it. Below that is another computer input pad. Is that what that is, Marty?
That's what it is, but it was on the command module, not the lunar module.
Right. To the right is a sextant that the astronauts used. Right below that is an inverter that was used in the command module to convert DC to AC power. And then on the left is the injector that was in, not the injector because they're all crashed into the moon on the ascent stage, but that's the engine injector for the ascent stage engine on the lunar module. And I took some close-ups of that. I didn't know if Marty had anything to do with any of these. He said he didn't. Of course, he's very familiar with the desky, having been the electrical engineer to wire that and other things up to the lunar module, and in the ascent stage part of it. So what a wonderful trip to the Neil Armstrong Museum. You've got to put that on your list. The Frontiers of Space is another beautiful museum. There's so many around our great country, over 30 museums in our great country. And I know that Doug Forrest has been to some of them. Thank you, Doug, for watching Stay Curious. Gary Gerald, how's it going with you, Gary? Were you? I was up in Ohio, and I couldn't believe all the corn and soybeans that were left to be harvested. And Gary's a farmer there in South Carolina, and I know he's working his tail off and just got in off that combine. And thank you for watching us, Gary Gerald. But boy, a lot of work to be done under that harvest moon yet, guys, out there, and particularly in Ohio. Carlton Bailey's watching, one of our friends, photographers. Dave Stange, of course, watching. Tom and Mark Usiak, the brothers up there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I gave them a break all week. I'll be calling you guys up later tonight or tomorrow. William Whiting's watching up there in Michigan. Everybody's enjoying the beautiful colors up there. I did enjoy both Tennessee and Ohio, and of course Kentucky. Driving through it, we're peaking with the fall colors. It's just beautiful, and I'm sure it's beautiful up there in Michigan. Steve Hammer's watching, and Christopher Mick. I'm sure he's enjoying some of the fall colors in his home state of Wisconsin. So, Marty, I appreciate you doing a great job. I watched the shows while I was gone, and you did a fabulous job. I could have done a better job recording some of our programs, but we'll get better at that as we go down the line. And I'm certainly need to take time off now and then because I'm re-energized and ready to take on everything going on. But man, what a week to go away. I missed 3 rocket launches, a human launch. There was 2 astronauts one that wanted to be on Stay Curious, Charlie Walker. Sorry that we missed you, Charlie, but next time you're in town, we'll get you on Stay Curious. But I appreciate everybody reaching out and wanting to help our museum and be on Stay Curious.
One more image.
I do have one more image because I want to tease everybody that, you know, when I'm on the road, I like to eat at Waffle House. And the best Waffle House in the country is right across from the Neil Armstrong Museum. No kidding. And it's been there for years. And I even tell the cook, you've got the best Western omelet I've ever tasted. So when you go to the Neil Armstrong Museum in Wapakoneta, Ohio, make sure that before or after you stop in what I consider a really good Waffle House. And And no, we didn't get any money from them, though we could always use new money for new devices here in our Stay Curious studios. So thank you, Marty, for reminding me of that. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of Stay Curious. We appreciate everybody supporting our humble museum under the direction of Karan Conklin. We're glad to have Angie Roberts back. Angie's one of our other key employees. Karen's assistant and our finance director, and she's been out on a medical leave, and saw her in the office today. So we're glad to get our team back here. Can't ignore Anita Truex and all that she does as our office manager, and Darren Roberts is doing a bang-up job. We had a bunch of kids in here. Darren's our education director, and he was thrilling them with a bunch of science experiments today. So Marty, thank you for all that you do. And on behalf of our museum, I'm Mark Marquette, saying that tomorrow we'll see you with Hugh Harris, the voice of NASA, to bridge the space between us.